Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Soil and Margaritas. My name is Roxana, and if you're new here, I garden in Zone 5. I'm located in central Indiana, and this channel is basically me sharing videos of my garden. Today's video is going to be way different from anything that I have done before. I figure winter is almost here, the cold, the snow, freezing temperatures, they're almost here, and I just don't get to be outside. But I still want to keep myself inspired and interesting in anything gardening, so I figured that I will share with you some of the people that I follow in video format, and hopefully you get to meet some new people that might help you in your own garden journey. Today, my first guest is my friend, my Instagram friend, Bethany from the Chicago Gardener, and I am so excited for her to share some tips and experiences with her own balcony garden. Hi, Bethany, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for being here. You're my first guest.
I know that's exciting and nerve-wracking, so I'm hoping everything goes smoothly.
So for those people who this is the first time hearing about you, share a little bit about you and about your garden, where you're located, what you're growing, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so I am in Chicago and actually inside the city limits of Chicago. I've been in Chicago for about 10 years now, a little bit over. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago about an hour away in Northwest Indiana, but actually been a full-time city resident now for a decade, which seems crazy to think about. But when I first moved to Chicago, I didn't have any outdoor space at all. And I don't think I realized how much I missed it until as I moved around apartments in the city, I got a little bit more outdoor space with each move, realized how much I need it, especially when we have super short times of warm weather in Chicago. So in 2019 was the first time we had a pretty large outdoor deck that got a lot of sun. And I used to think I would have to wait until I had a yard to have a garden, which yards are not the most common thing when you're living in the city, but I decided to just start putting out some pots. I got a small elevated bed and I just kind of went to town, and every year it's just gotten bigger and bigger. So now since 2020, we moved into what is now our actual home, which is exciting. And I garden on one of our decks, which is about 18 by 19 square feet. So everything's on a deck. Our deck is 3 stories up. Everything's in containers because there's no planting in the ground except for the parkway in front of our house. But it's just been really great. It's something I never thought I would be able to have in the city, and it's completely changed how I thought about gardening.
And it's only 18 by 19. I was thinking that your space was a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, so compared to what I used to have, this seems gigantic. And then I see other gardeners who have yards, and then I'm like, oh, I guess it is kind of small on a scale of a garden. So we have the front deck, which is actually right out the window there, which is nice to kind of see it as I'm sitting inside. And then there's a back deck, which I told myself I wasn't going to turn into a garden because I didn't want to take over all of the outdoor space for my hobby, but I just got some raised beds for it. So I think it will be turning into at least partially a garden out there. So yeah, the main area is 18 by 19. The back one's also 18 by 19. And even though I won't use all of it to garden, it'll at least give me a little bit more room to grow the things that I love.
Do you have full sun on both sides of those balconies, or is it one more shady?
Yeah, so the back deck faces east, the front deck faces west. And I was initially going to do the east deck, but there's some, mechanical stuff on it, which makes the deck a little bit smaller. So I went west. So I'd say they both get similar amounts of sun. The only difference is there's trees in the front, which kind of start to block the sun. Well, afternoon now as we're getting into winter, but usually around 7 p.m. in the summertime. So I'd still say they both get what's technically considered full sun. The front or the back deck just probably gets a little bit more sun because there's not trees or anything blocking it. But I used to have a south-facing deck, and that got all of the sun, almost too much sometimes. A lot of my plants couldn't handle all of that heat.
Yeah, and obviously everything that you do is through containers. Do you have, I know that I have seen your videos, and for those of you guys watching, you have different types of containers. Is there one type that you prefer over other because of you're growing in a balcony?
Yeah, I think, oh, that's hard because I always can find like the pros and cons of everything. But I think the raised beds, or I guess technically they're elevated beds because they actually have a bottom on them. The elevated beds is what I felt like changed the game for me. It made me feel like I had more of an actual garden because there was some structure to it. I also like that they're
Mm-hmm.
off the ground, which is nice. So most of my raised beds, I think, come up to like waist high. So I don't have to bend over, which is nice. Whereas all my other
That's
pots
nice.
that are on the ground, I do. And it also just allows me more space to kind of plant things together. I'd say for the most part in pots, it's like one plant per pot. So it's not always the most like visually appealing arrangement, but I feel like I can get more of an arrangement sort of feel in the raised bed. So I think those are my favorite, even though I do love all of the containers I use.
Yeah, because I know that like I watch all of your videos, but I recently watched one that you started your dahlias in grow bags, right?
Yes, and those are great. So what I love the most about grow bags is they're the easiest to move around. So like my raised beds, once they're in their location, I can't move them, especially once they have soil in them. But the grow bags, I can move either around the deck where the sun's hitting certain areas during certain times of the season, or what's best about the dahlias is I have to move them down 3 flights. And so if they were in like a ceramic pot or terracotta pot, even though I could still probably move them, it's much easier just to pick up the grow bag, which essentially weighs nothing except for the soil and the plant inside of it.
Awesome. What about irrigation? I mean, I know for myself, I have stuff in containers, but being outside, I can just hook it up to the hose. But how is that like in a balcony for you?
Yeah, so it's funny, going back to our last place when I first started gardening, there wasn't even an outdoor hose faucet. So my husband figured out a way to hook a hose up to like the nearest bathroom sink, and I would drag that in and out every day. Um, Last year, now that we have our own place, we do have the hose faucets. That was one of the things I looked for when we were going around and looking at places. And I had a hose and I thought, this is great. I don't really think I need anything else until I got an irrigation drip system last year. And it was, again, one of those things that I was like, I wish I'd had this all along. Because even though it doesn't take a
Mm-hmm.
super long time to water my garden, I'd say with the hose, maybe it's like 30 minutes walking around, but that saves me 30 minutes. It runs every morning
Right.
at the best time of day. It's not always dependent on me going out there, if I don't make it out till the afternoon when things are already drooping. So irrigation just saved me so much time and made sure my plants were getting watered when it was best for them. So now I'm like, I want to get irrigation hooked up to everything, everything that I
Right.
can.
Right. And not only that, but I suppose that, if you go out on vacation or out for a few days, then you can rely on the irrigation.
Yes, no, that's probably been the most important thing because we don't leave home too often. I really do like being at home, but even if we're just going away for a weekend, especially in the summer when I would have to water every day, it's that peace of mind that
Mm-hmm.
yes, we can just go back to Indiana for a weekend or do a quick trip out of town. I don't have to worry about it. My favorite thing this year that I added was the automatic timer connects to my phone, which I didn't have last year. So we would leave. I would be nervous if it actually worked. Like, was it actually running? Did it somehow break when we happened to be out of town? But now it's hooked up to my phone so I can see that it ran, or I can even run it myself if I need to. So
Oh,
that's been really great.
fancy.
Yeah, technology is just crazy now with all the stuff that you
That's
can do in your
awesome.
garden. Yeah, it's been really, really great to have.
You mentioned, like now you have your own place. Now you can do things to the outside for balconies. And I have no experience. That's why I wonder of these questions. For balconies, is there something that you probably shouldn't do in order not to damage the surface or just being outside, period?
Yeah, the main thing that I think I just found this out through Googling because I don't think I would have known this term before. But I was looking up like things you should know when you're gardening on a deck, specifically a rooftop deck. And it said, you have to know what your deck capacity is. And I was like, well, I have no idea what that means or what it is, but it's basically the
Right.
pounds per square foot that your deck can handle. So now I know more about it than I ever thought I would. But we were talking to some people, and if you want somebody to come and actually find out the deck capacity for you, if you don't know, they have to like cut into the ceiling and take all these measurements, and then you have to fix everything that they cut into. But luckily, the person that lived here before us knew that it was 100 pounds per square foot, which is great. I think the minimum recommended that I saw online was at least 60 pounds per square foot. So knowing
Okay.
that we're like above that is great. If you don't know your deck capacity though, I mean, other than my raised beds, everything else is pretty lightweight. I mean, I
Pretty
have some
lightweight,
pots that are, like 20 inches, but they're plastic. So even with soil in them, it's not like they're going to be really, really heavy. But if you want to put in like raised beds, grow trees on your rooftop deck, I would definitely figure out the deck capacity before you actually cause damage and find like your gardens falling into your house or something like that. But I had no idea that was a thing until I started looking it up. So I'm glad I came across it.
Yeah. See, I was thinking more in the terms of, like water damage or something like that, but I never thought about weight capacity.
Yeah. And I've had a few people ask me about water damage to the deck. I haven't seen any that I've noticed yet. So this was the third year of gardening here. I do try to move around my pots a little bit year after year, so they're not always just sitting in the same place. Raised beds, I obviously can't do anything about. I haven't noticed any water damage yet. But I do kind of have the mindset to like, I would rather have the garden and potentially have a little bit of like damage to the wood than not have a garden at all. But anything that would be like very structural, we did get that checked out. So like the deck was built so that there's drainage and it goes into, what's it called? Not the pipes. It goes into the spout and goes out of the house. So it was built to have water running on it, which is nice.
Gotcha. Awesome. So like for myself, like comes winter, I have everything on the side of the house somewhere, whatever I can fix it. But how is that for you? How's the storage, in a balcony when you have all of these containers? And knowing Chicago, I mean, I'm not super familiar with it, but I suppose that the wind is a little bit of trouble for you. How do you handle that?
Yeah, the winter is cold, and it gets very windy up here too. But storage has been an interesting thing because basically anything that I need to store indoors has to come into the house. We don't have a shed that I can put stuff in. We do have the garage, but the garage isn't huge. And with the dahlias that I just moved in there, I mean, that's about all the space I feel that I can take up. So we really have to store everything that needs to be moved inside somewhere. So that's always interesting to try to figure out. I mean, I'll have like my terracotta pots just lying against a wall. I do cover like the patio furniture and all that stuff I cover. So I'm thinking like maybe I can like slide some stuff underneath the patio furniture that also has the cover on it to protect it. So it's kind of like the things that I know might break or that mean a lot to me, I move inside and just have to keep them in the house throughout the winter. The things that I'm like, I think maybe they can stand up to the weather out there, or that if they get damaged, it's not going to be that big of a deal to replace it. I'll leave outside. So things like my tomato cages and stuff, I mean, those I leave outside throughout the winter and they've been fine. But yeah, finding places to put stuff has been a challenge in here. I really, really wish I had like a shed or a greenhouse if we're going for things I wish I had.
Well, I saw one of your videos where you replaced your tall plastic greenhouse for a smaller size, right?
Yeah, so I have a short one now. So the large one I tried last year, I think I put it out in October, and by November the wind like not even just blew it away, but broke the poles in half, the metal poles.
Oh, wow.
So that's how strong the wind can get. And it was secured down to the deck. So the top half just basically broke off and was bouncing around the deck. My husband actually heard it and ran up and grabbed it. And I woke up and he's like, oh, the greenhouse is inside now. So
in two pieces.
Yes, exactly. And so for that winter last year, I just left most of the plants kind of out up against the wall of the house. And I think all of them survived, except for the ones that got too much rain in the spring. But all of them survived winter. This winter, I've heard it's supposed to be worse. So I got a shorter greenhouse that's going to be, it's lower than the wall around the deck. So I'm hoping, I mean, so far the wind hasn't taken it anywhere. And I think it's been out for over a month. So I'm going to try to put the plants inside of that for a little extra protection. And again, anything that's really important to me, I will move into the garage. Anything that I'm like, if this plant dies, I'll be sad, but I can replace it. I'm going to try in the greenhouse and see how it does. And then there's also plants I just can't carry down because they're too heavy.
So in your experience, what have been some of the plants that are easier for you to grow in containers, and what have been like the worst, the ones that you definitely can do well, in your opinion?
Yeah. And so I'll say the ones that I can do well so far, I feel like have been dahlias, which was surprising to me just because I don't know, they seemed like they're so beautiful. They might be difficult, if that makes sense. Like something so beautiful might be hard to maintain, but those have done really well. Zinnias have done really well. Tomatoes have done really well for me. One of my biggest mistakes, I think, when I started was growing things in too small of pots. So like the first tomato plant I grew, I think I tried it in a 6-inch or 8-inch pot, and it was indeterminate, and that did not work. So once I got the container size issues figured out, those did really well. So for the most part, I'd say the plants do well. I think the hardest things I've had issues with so far are, I'm trying to think of a specific plant of what I've killed lately. Probably bulbs, I think, were my biggest issue of plants that I lost this year. The ones that I planted in the raised beds did okay, but anything I put in a smaller pot, we had so much rain this spring that they ended up rotting in the pots. I had a similar thing happen with a lavender tree that I had outside that I mean, small, not like a big lavender tree, that it just got root rot. So things that don't like a lot of water or that are growing in smaller pots, that's what I think I've had the biggest issue with. And I don't really have much of a solution because there's nowhere really to prevent them from getting rain on them. Like I don't have any sort of covering or like shade area I can kind of push them under, except for maybe our table, but that's about it. So that's been my biggest issue.
Unquestionably, Bethany, your garden is amazing. I mean, you're growing dahlias, zinnias. I mean, you have raspberries. I complain. You put me to shame because I'm like, I can't grow raspberries. I don't have the space. And look at you. You have a small balcony. I'm like, I have raspberries.
I have 2, and I have to keep myself to 2 because I really don't have any more room.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you even have a lemon tree.
Yeah, I don't think the lemon tree likes being here as much as I like it being here. I mean, it's happy in the summer. Right now it's in the winter, or I moved it inside for the winter under a grow light. And, you know, it's dropping all of its leaves from the transition. It requires a lot of attention to keep it happy enough through winter to make it through to the next season. So, but it's one of those that I love it so much. I'm going to try my best to make it work here. But honestly, the lemon tree is probably like, just send me to Florida for the winter and then I'll come back when it's warm enough here.
So what would you say to someone that has, you know, a small balcony and wants to start, you know, gardening or trying new plants and they think that they can't because they have a small balcony? What would you say to them?
I would say as long as you can fit one pot on there, you can grow something. So it doesn't have to be, and that was an issue for me. I feel like starting off, I was like, well, if I can't do everything, I'm not going to do anything. But you can even grow just a few herbs, and the difference that can make when you grow your own herbs and pick them and then make something inside with them, it can really be like magical. So even if you do have a small space, throw 2 or 3 terracotta pots, grow some herbs if you have room for it. I know you have one of these, like the vertical towers.
The grain stock.
Yeah, there's a lot of container options now that I feel like are more focused on vertical growing, which is great if you don't have a lot of like area to your balcony, but you do have, I mean, in just a few feet of height. So even growing things like strawberries, which can produce a lot throughout the season. If you can fit, you know, things like one indeterminate cherry tomato, those can produce so much. So even if you just get like one plant, but it produces a lot, I think you'd still really love having it in your garden. Just start with 2 plants. You'll get addicted. You'll find ways to fit everything else.
That's great advice. Bethany, where can people find you? Are you on social media? Do you have a YouTube channel? Tell us.
I am. So I'm mostly on Instagram and YouTube, but both of those are at Chicago Gardener. I have a TikTok. I feel like that's like far too advanced and young for me. I'm barely on it, so I wouldn't recommend following me there. But yeah, Instagram and YouTube are where I'm at the most. YouTube is more like instructional, kind of what I'm doing in my garden stuff. So yeah, it's really fun. Awesome. I really like kind of being out there and talking to other gardeners. I mean, I've followed you, I think since I started. You're one of the first accounts, and it's been great to learn from everyone else.
Awesome. It's been amazing. I truly appreciate you sharing your garden with us through Instagram and through YouTube. And if anybody's watching this, obviously there are some people watching, you got to go follow her because she's pretty amazing. Bethany, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time and, you know, talking your garden with me.
No, it was so exciting to actually meet you. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, this person I followed for so long and I get to actually talk to. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I love talking about gardening, plants. things that work, things that didn't work with anybody. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I truly did. If you guys get the chance, check her Instagram and her YouTube channel. You will not be sorry that you found her. Thank you for being here, you guys, and until the next time.